Hello, one and all, to another edition of Ethics. Today we are going to continue our discussion of the abortion issue. Now, previously, we talked about Don Marquis' famous argument that abortion is wrong, not because the fetus is a person, necessarily, but because abortion destroys the future of the fetus. The fetus, even though it's not yet a person, for argument's sake, it's still something that has a future like ours. And Marquis thinks that the destruction of this future like ours is the ultimate deprivation. It's the worst thing you can do to anything, whether that thing is a person or isn't a person, right? So today we are going to talk about the other side of the issue. We are going to discuss Judith Thomson's very, very famous article, A Defense of Abortion. This is, I think it's not going too far to say that along with Peter Singer's Famine, Affluence, and Morality, Thomson's article, A Defense of Abortion, is probably the most famous and widely anthologized article in applied ethics. So, and it's weird and a lot of fun. So, if you read it, hopefully you did, you realize how weird it is, right? So, Marquis approached the abortion issue by granting the strongest version of his opponent's argument. He said, okay, let's assume that the fetus is not a person and doesn't have the moral rights that we normally attach to a person. Does it then follow that it's wrong or that it's okay to have an abortion? And he decided that no, it isn't okay. Abortion is still immoral because of the destruction of a future like ours, right? Thomson is going to have a similar tactic, and philosophers often do this. They will attack somebody's position by granting the strongest version of somebody's argument, right? And Thomson is going to say, well, let's assume that in fact a fetus is a person with all the same moral rights as you and me, right? Thomson doesn't believe this. She makes that clear. She's just granting this for the sake of argument. But she wants to, for the sake of argument, assume that a fetus is a person, same as you and me, and has all the same moral rights as any other human person, right? Does it then follow that it is wrong to have an abortion, to destroy the fetus in all or most cases? And surprisingly, you'd think the answer is yes, it is wrong to destroy the fetus, since it's wrong to destroy you and me. But surprisingly, Thomson says, well, no. Actually, in most cases, abortion is not wrong, even if the fetus is a person, just like you and me. So, how does that work? Well, it works through a series of increasingly bizarre thought experiments, right? The first of which is maybe the most famous thought experiment in applied ethics. It is the story of the famous violinist. So, Thomson says, okay, imagine this scenario. That you wake up one morning in your bed, and you find that you are attached via a series of tubes, back to back, with this man who is a stranger to you, right? And you are sort of medically attached to him, right? Another man, a third man, or a third person, explains to you, I'm sorry about the situation that we're in, but the truth of the matter is the sick man next to you in the bed is the most famous violinist in the world. He's maybe the best violinist who's ever lived. His music changes the lives of anybody who hears it, right? And unfortunately, he has this very rare kidney disease. And he needs what he needs is the use of someone else's kidneys for some period of time. Let's say 9 months, to choose a length of time entirely at random. So what the Society of Music Lovers is going to need you to do is they're going to need you to lay in bed for 9 months, attached via some tubes to this famous violinist to help nurse him back to health. At the end of that period, you can go on your merry way, right? The violinist will be all better. He'll be happy. Maybe he'll sign a CD for you, right? And everybody will be very, very thankful to you, right? But we are going to have to insist, the Society of Music Lovers say, that you lay in bed all 9 months with the violinist. Now, this is a bizarre situation, but let's talk for a second if you found yourself in that situation. Well, what are the moral dimensions here? What are the moral issues? Let's start here. It would be super duper heroic of you to lay in bed all 9 months with a violinist, the stranger to you, to nurse him back to health, right? So that would be great. But actually, the Society of Music Lovers, they're not really a militant group. They haven't, they kidnapped you in the night, deciding that it was easier to get forgiveness than permission, right? I forgot to mention an important element of this is that after the worldwide search, it turns out only your kidneys will nurse the famous violinist back to health for some reason. So it has to be you. It can't be anybody else. Now, the Society of Music Lovers, they're not armed. There are no armed guards. There are no bars on the window. And so it would be quite easy for you, to simply unplug. Simply say, well, you know what? This isn't for me, right? If you unplug, of course, you are dooming the famous violinist to certain death. Right, you can't live without kidneys. You can live with one kidney, but you can't live with 0 kidneys. Now, the moral question Thomson proposes is, let's say that you get up and you unplug from the famous violinist. Have you done something seriously morally wrong? We agree it would be super heroic for you to lay in bed all 9 months, but if you decide, this isn't for me, this is too much of a disruption to my life, and I'm going to unplug from the violinist, even though that guarantees his death, have you done something seriously morally wrong? Thomson takes it that most of us intuitively think that no. I mean, it's too bad this violinist is in that situation, but it's too much to ask that you just lay in bed all 9 months for this, for the benefit of the stranger and disrupt your life, disrupt your health, and so on, right? Now, this is an argument by analogy. An analogy is a story we tell that is supposed to have certain kinds of similarities to real-world examples and supposed to clarify our moral intuitions about the real-world scenario, right? So, well, what is this supposed to be? What is the story of the famous violinist supposed to be analogous to? It should be clear that this is meant to be analogous to a woman a pregnant woman who does not want to have a baby and would prefer to have an abortion, right? You can think of having an abortion as unplugging from the fetus, right? Guaranteeing its death. Now, the important issue here is that most of us would agree that it's not wrong. Thomson assumes that most of us agree intuitively it would not necessarily be wrong to unplug from the famous violinist even if he's going to die. And she thinks that, well, if you think that it's not wrong to unplug from the famous violinist, then you should not think that it's wrong for a woman to choose to have an abortion. The famous violinist is clearly a person. He clearly has all the same sort of moral rights as you and me. And so even the innovation here is that even if we assume that the fetus is a person, just like you and me and the famous violinist, it's still, Thomson thinks, it's still the case that it would not necessarily be wrong to unplug from the fetus and have an abortion, right? Now, so here are the notes you should get down. If the fetus is a person, is it wrong to destroy it? Thomson's answer is no. And the reason why is to consider the story of the famous violinist. She says if it is not wrong to unplug from the violinist, guaranteeing his death, it should not be wrong in similar circumstances to have an abortion. Now, I can hear some of you, probably some of you of the pro-life stripe, screaming right now, saying, well, what do we mean by there's a lot of work being done here in similar circumstances, because the case of the famous violinist is not really like, in certain ways, a woman who finds herself pregnant. The main issue being that, well, you found yourself hooked up to the famous violinist through no fault of your own. Someone kidnapped you. Someone used force and stuck you in the bed and put you in the situation. Most cases of pregnancy are not the results of non-consensual acts. Most women, who are pregnant, chose to have sex, right? Now, of course, there are pregnancies that are the result of rape, right? And at the very least, I think, if nothing else, Thomson's argument here proves that abortion should be legal in the case of rape, right? Because if you if a woman finds herself in a situation where she is pregnant through no fault of her own, through no consensual act, then the analogy to being in bed with the famous violinist holds perfectly. And if you have an intuition, you can unplug from the famous violinist. That intuition ought to transfer to allowing a woman to have an abortion, at the very least in the case of rape, right? Now, is the example of the famous violinist then limited only to cases of pregnancies that result from rape? A lot of people say yes. Thomson goes further. She thinks that we can extend this argument further along. But most people think that the famous violinist example pretty much ends with at the question of consent. And those people point out that, well, a woman who chooses to have sex is maybe not choosing to be pregnant, but she is choosing to engage in an activity that she realizes is one possible result of engaging in that activity is pregnancy, and therefore she can be held morally responsible for the pregnancy, right? So, give me just 1 second. Okay, so now the question becomes whether or not we can extend Thomson's argument about the famous violinist, the moral intuitions that she has sort of primed about the famous violinist, whether or not we can expand this argument, right? I should speak for you. Thomson takes it, as I said, that she has at the very least proven that a woman who finds herself pregnant as a result of rape ought to be entitled to an abortion, right? Now, can we also make an argument that even women who are pregnant for consensual reasons, as a result of consensual acts, ought to also have the right to an abortion in most cases? Thomson thinks we can. To make this case, she introduces the question of the right, what's often called the right to life. You hear this expression a lot in the abortion debate. Again, you see it on a lot of billboards, right? The question of doesn't the fetus, don't the unborn have a right to life, right? Now, Thomson, for the sake of this argument, has already granted full personhood to the fetus. So, for her, in this discussion, the question is going to be: do people generally have a right to life? Right? We normally think yes. Obviously, I mean, you read Locke, right? But Thomson wants to think about what we mean whenever we say that somebody has a right to life. There are a few things that we might mean, right? For instance, it might, if I say that I have a right to life, it might mean, could it mean that I have a right to demand that I be given anything that I need to live, right? That, does my right to life include my right to be fed, right, at your expense, right? I need food and water and air to survive, and if I can't get those things for myself, can I demand that other people give them to me? Thomson, following in the tradition of John Locke, thinks that the answer to this question is obviously no, right? Of course, Thomson being Thomson, she has to make her point with a bizarre thought experiment, right? She says, well, imagine this situation. Imagine that you have some rare fever. You have some special fever, right? And you're going to die of this fever. And the only thing that can save you is if some actor comes and touches you on the head, right? Thomson's writing this back in 1971. The example she uses is Henry Fonda. Henry Fonda was a very famous actor, well known for being very good looking. So Thomson says, imagine I have a fever, and the only thing that can save my life is if Henry Fonda comes and touches my fevered brow with his cool hand, right? Now, we can make the proper changes for whoever the sex symbols are these days. I don't know, ladies. Who are the hot actors these days?
Chris Hemsworth.
Hemsworth. Right. Okay.
And for the boys, Scarlett
Johansson. My go-to. Right.
Or girls.
Or girls. Right. Or girls. Guys, girls. Whatever your preference. We're not taking sides on this. Don't title line me. Anyway, imagine you have a fever. The only thing that can save your life is if some very famous actor came and touched you on the head. Now, we all agree that it would be wonderful if Liam Hemsworth flew at his own expense to your house to touch you on the head, right? In fact, we might even get a Twitter campaign going, demanding hashtag. Cool hand on warm brow, right? And sort of pressure him into it, right? Now, it would be wonderful if he did that. Of course, nobody thinks that you have a right to demand that Liam Hemsworth comes and touches you on the head. I shouldn't say nobody. Reasonable people these days. There's all sorts of crazy people on Twitter, right? But reasonable people would agree, I think, would generally agree that it would be nice for him to do it, but if he doesn't do it, he hasn't done anything wrong. He just hasn't been as good as he could be, right? So the point being that the right, even though you are a person and you have a right to life, your right to life does not necessarily mean that you have a right to be given absolutely anything you need to survive, right? You cannot demand that others provide certain things to you that you need to live. So the right to life doesn't mean the right to be given anything that you need to survive. Now, maybe the right to life means the right not to be killed. That makes some intuitive sense, and that seems sort of uncontroversial. But Thomson points out, well, it can't mean the right never to be killed under any circumstances. The famous violinist has a right to may have a right to life, but by unplugging from the violinist, you're killing him, right? So, and we can think of a variety of other cases where even though somebody might have a right to life, there might be circumstances under which it's not wrong to kill that person, right? So the right to life can't be an unlimited right never to be killed, right? So what does it mean? Well, Thomson thinks that the right to life means the right not to be killed unjustly, the right not to be killed arbitrarily and for no good reason, right? The question then becomes, does the woman who has an abortion under normal circumstances, does she do something unjust when she destroys the fetus? Is abortion then unjust? Right. So here are the notes. Here's the scope of the argument so far. Don't people have a right to life? Well, Thomson says, what is this right? What is it supposed to be? Is this a right to be given whatever I need to live? And no. She says, it can't be that because you can't demand some actor come to your house and help you, right? Does this mean a right simply not to be killed under any circumstances? And no, it can't mean that. We often think of circumstances where killing you or doing something that brings about your death is not necessarily wrong, right? If it's going to mean anything, I should have put a star by this one. Thomson thinks the right to life means the right not to be killed unjustly, not to be killed for wrong, unjust or arbitrary reasons, right? And now the question becomes, is abortion then unjust? In most cases. Okay, so now the question becomes, if the right to life means the right not to be killed unjustly, is it unjust then to have an abortion, to destroy a fetus? Now, Thomson's answer to this is no, and we want to be careful about the views that we attribute to Thomson. She is not necessarily an extremist when it comes to abortion rights. She makes the case, and I'll repeat some of these later. She thinks that there are some cases where abortion are seriously immoral and should even be illegal, right? But consider normal circumstances. Consider a typical circumstances of a woman who is choosing to have responsible sex, and as a result of some sort of accident of birth control or whatnot, finds herself in the midst of an unwanted pregnancy, right? Now, is it necessarily wrong for the woman to decide, well, I don't want this. I don't want this pregnancy. Thomson again here makes a rather strange analogy to try to clarify our moral intuitions about this, right? She says, well, now imagine this. Imagine you live in an apartment and it's in sort of a sketchy neighborhood, right? And you know that there is a spate of burglaries in the neighborhood, right? And it's a warm evening, right? You don't have air conditioning, so you leave You leave the window open to let the breeze in, right? The next day you come out to your living room and you find a stack of all your valuables, right? Sitting next to your couch, the stereo equipment all sort of stacked up. There's a burglar sitting on your couch eating your Chinese food from the night before, watching TV. And says, "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm about to clear out of here. Just let me finish off this this episode of The Shield and finish off this Chinese food, right? And then I'll be out of your hair, right?" Now, obviously, we all agree that you have a right to demand that the burglar leave, right? And you maybe call the police to get some help along these lines. Now, the burglar might say to you, "Now, wait a second. Let me explain my situation. I've got a problem with the ponies. I got a problem with gambling, and I'm in debt to some really violent gangster people, and I owe them a lot of money. So if I don't hock your stuff here, if you just throw me out, and I don't have anything to show for this evening's burglaries, they're going to hurt me. They're going to break my legs and maybe kill me, right? So throwing me out of here is going to result in my death." Nonetheless, we would probably say, most people would probably say, you still have a right to demand that the burglar leave, even if this means his death, right? Now, let's tweak it even a little more. Let's say that you didn't just leave your windows open. Let's say that you actually you were responsible. You left bars on your windows. You had a security system, and somehow the burglar managed to get to the bars on your windows and disable the burglar alarm, and still ended up with all of your valuables piled up, and still wants to leave with all your valuables. Does the fact that him dying as a result of this is possibly dying as a result of this proof that you have no claim to make him give back your stuff, or let him keep your stuff, or make him leave without your stuff? Thomson takes it that the fact that you put the bars on the windows and you had the security system in place is all the more evidence that it's not unjust to make the burglar leave, even if it results in his death. So here we have another argument by analogy. The analogy should be clear. The burglar is the unplanned fetus, and the question then is it unjust to ask the fetus to leave, as it were, even if the fetus is certain to die as a result of it, right? Thomson then takes it a step further in the weirdest of her examples. She says, imagine this. Imagine instead of a burglar, imagine we're in a situation where there are these people seeds. There are seeds that float through the air in the way that dandelion seeds float through the air, and the way that dandelion seeds occasionally attach to the earth and grow little dandelions. These people seeds blow around, and once in a while they will take root somewhere and grow a person, right? And this is a real problem in this people seed world. So if you don't want a person, you need to take all these sorts of precautions. You need to put screens on your windows. You need to make sure that you're cleaning your house a lot. You're vacuuming the carpeting, you're cleaning the curtains and everything, and you're taking all sorts of precautions to make sure that no people seeds take root. Now, imagine that a people seed, in fact, nonetheless, despite all of your valiant efforts to keep people seed from taking root, a people seed, in fact, takes root, and now there is a person growing in your living room, right? Is it wrong for you to say, you know what, I did everything I could and I would not like a person, so I would like this person to leave, even if that means the death of the person, right? So now, even people who have a lot of sympathy for the famous violinist argument, by the time we're talking about people seeds, the people tend to scratch their heads a little bit. I think the people seeds analogy is maybe bizarre enough that maybe I don't know what my moral intuitions are supposed to be about it. But the conclusion that Thomson draws is that women, under normal circumstances, taking proper precautions with birth control and so on, engaging in consensual sex acts but not wanting to be pregnant, consenting to the sex but not consenting to the person, they are not necessarily doing anything unjust by having an abortion. And if you think it's not unjust to throw out the burglar, or if you think that it's not unjust to throw out the people seed that's growing, then Thomson thinks that you should not, in most cases, think that it's wrong for a woman to have an abortion, right? Now, this of course doesn't mean that abortion is never wrong. I think one of the appealing things about Thomson's article, to me anyway, is that she never denies that having an abortion is a very serious moral issue, and she never denies the moral value of the fetus. Quite the opposite. She grants it full personhood status, right? But she thinks that if you follow these analogies, you should understand that it's not wrong to have an abortion, even in the conditions of this full personhood. And of course, this means that there are going to be some cases where she thinks it is seriously morally wrong and perhaps should be illegal to have an abortion. She says clearly nothing that she can say about nothing in this argument can be used to justify having an abortion past the point where a fetus is viable, right? If the fetus can live outside the mother, there's, she thinks, no moral argument for having an abortion at that point, right? In fact, it's illegal in all 50 states to have an abortion when past the point of viability. That's part of the limitations of Roe versus Wade. As I said before, old friend Peter Singer, there have been some people who have made the case that that viability should not necessarily be the standard, but they're in the minority. While we're talking about Peter Singer, by the way, he argues that you should stay in bed with a violinist all 9 months. If you find yourself in that circumstance, you do something seriously morally wrong by unplugging from the violinist, because again, he's a utilitarian, and it doesn't matter. Rights don't matter to him as much, if at all, as the bad consequences, and the consequences are death, inconvenience versus death, right? So, okay, Thomson also talks about not just past the point of viability, but she also recognizes that the fetus, the fetus is not nothing. I mean, it does have some moral value, And having an abortion is a serious moral issue. And there might be reasons that we find abhorrent for having an abortion. The example she gives is, it used to be the case, I don't think it is anymore, it used to be the case that women weren't supposed to fly in airplanes if they were pregnant, right? Is that still the case? Do you know, Beth? Anyway, it used to be back circa 1970, it was the case that pregnant women weren't supposed to fly, right? And one of the examples that Thomson gives is, say a woman is planning a trip to Europe. She was trying to get pregnant, right? She wants a child, but she has a chance to go to, and she gets pregnant, but she has a chance to go to Europe, and so has an abortion just so she can go see Rome, right? Thomson thinks, well, treating a serious moral issue that frivolously would be wrong. It would be seriously morally wrong. So just because we generally support a right to an abortion doesn't necessarily mean that we morally or legally think that abortion is a kind of unlimited right. But this does bring us to sort of the kind of core issue at the heart of all of this is the law, right? We talked yesterday, or we talked in the last lecture about the Supreme Court decision on Roe versus Wade that established that there is a general universal right of women to have access to abortion procedures, right? And that the state does something unjust by interfering with that, right? On this issue, Thomson points out that, there might be good reasons to think that abortion in most cases, even in all cases, is seriously morally wrong, right? There might be some people who think that the fetus has a very high moral value and that it's morally wrong to destroy it, right? This doesn't necessarily mean, however, Thomson points out, this doesn't mean that it should be illegal to have an abortion, right? Because just because something is immoral and we judge it as immoral doesn't necessarily mean that it should be illegal. Thomson thinks that there are the laws of a just society, of a good society, require us to be minimally decent. They require the bare minimum of us that is necessary to get along. Laws like don't steal from people, don't kill people, etc., right? The laws don't require us to be superheroes. They don't require us to be wonderful people. They require us just to be minimally decent, right? Here, Thomson talks about the story of the Good Samaritan, right, from the Bible. Jesus tells a story of the Good Samaritan. A man is traveling. If you don't know the story of the Good Samaritan, a man is traveling in a long time ago. It's just a parable. It's not historically accurate. But imagine this: a man is traveling in a foreign land. Traveling back in Jesus' day was a very, very dangerous proposition. There were there were bandits and highwaymen all over the place. So they waylay this man, they attack him, they leave him. They take all his stuff, they leave him dead in the ditch. He is found. This foreigner is found by a local Samaritan, right? Who a Samaritan was just a group of people, right? And the Samaritan takes this injured man to a local hotel. He puts him up for the month. He pays to to be bandaged. He pays for his food. He tells the hotel manager, if you have any problems or you need any more money, come and talk to me. Take care of this person, right? So this is Jesus's parable for how the ideal way that we human beings should treat each other. We should treat each other the way that we would treat friends and family members, right? The impact of the story of the parable of the Good Samaritan is that the Samaritan sees this this injured stranger, and the story actually goes that several people pass by the injured stranger and do nothing. But the Samaritan comes along, and the Samaritan treats this injured stranger as though it's a family member, right? Does everything he could. It treats him like it's his own child, right? Does everything he possibly could to help him. And this is, Jesus is making the point that this is the ideal for how human beings should treat each other. We should treat even strangers as though they're family members, right? Now, that would be great. And this is, the Good Samaritan is a moral superhero. It is somebody who goes above and beyond what is required by justice and morality, right? It would be great if we all did that, but Thomson points out that, again, following in the tradition of John Locke, that we our laws, the laws of the land, don't require us to be superheroes. Right? And a law that requires us to treat strangers like family members is an unjust law. It would be great if we were that charitable with everybody, but laws that require that kind of charity, that demand that kind of charity from us, are unjust laws. Right? The big issue during the founding of the United States about quartering soldiers in homes, right? This was a big issue. The British soldiers used to have the right to just come in and just hang out at your house as an uninvited guest and eat all your food, right? And you were expected as a subject, before you were for America declared independence, right? You were expected as a subject of the crown to treat the soldiers as though they were your family members, right? So it's deep in our DNA, our American DNA, that we don't want laws that demand we treat strangers like family members. We want laws that protect require the bare minimum of us, right? The bare minimum that's required to get along, that protect our most fundamental and basic rights, that don't require us to help each other. So Thomson distinguishes here between the Good Samaritan, the moral superhero, and what she calls the minimally decent Samaritan, right? The person who does not hurt anybody, doesn't help that much, but just doesn't enough to get by. Doesn't interfere with anybody. Doesn't hurt anybody, but basically follows the laws, right? And Thomson's point is that our laws can't require us to be moral superheroes. They can't require us to be good Samaritans. They can only require us to be minimally decent Samaritans. Otherwise, they're unjust laws. The point of this is that a law that, for instance, requires you to lay in bed for all 9 months to nurse the famous violinist back to health would be an unjust law. It's a law that's requiring you to be a moral superhero. It would be great if you did that, but you shouldn't be required by law to do it. We might think you're a bad person, right? If you unplug from the famous violinist, you might say, well, you should have laid in bed with him all 9 months. Nonetheless, a law that requires it is unjust, right? Same thing with a burglar. The burglar who needs your help, or he's going to be killed by the mob, right? It would be great if you helped the burglar, maybe. And we might think that you're a bad person and don't approve of you if you don't help the burglar. But a law that requires you to help the burglar is itself an unjust law. And the coup de grace here, the end result, is that Thomson thinks that whatever we make make of abortion, whatever we make of the act of abortion, whatever we make of a woman's reasons for having an abortion, whether we approve of her or don't approve of her, want to, like her or don't like her, want to have her over as a dinner guest or don't want to have her over as a dinner guest, whatever. A law that requires a woman to have a child that she did not choose to have and does not want to carry to term would be a law that requires her to be a moral superhero, requires her to be a good Samaritan. And therefore, it's an unjust law. There you go. That is Judith Thomson's defense of abortion. So, yes, it's a shame. This is always a very controversial article. People often have lots of strongly held opinions on both sides of this article. So I feel deprived that I'm not here to hear you yell about it at me. Often I find, in fact, people who are pro-choice often find the most things objectionable about Thomson's article, in fact. So, yeah, it's always good it always makes for good discussion. So, okay, but that's all I got. The attendance password is lime. So, I had some friends over this weekend. We had an abundance of limes for margaritas. Yes, so lime. Anyway, thanks a lot. Talk to you guys later.